I never thought a road trip would turn into one of the most unexpectedly intense nights of my life, but here I am, stuck in a tiny rest stop bathroom with the guy the first barely knew an hour ago, while a thunderstorm rages like the sky is about to rip apart. If someone had told me this morning that I'd be hiding out from a storm with a stranger who might just end up meaning more than I realized, I'd have laughed it off. But as the rain pounds against the grimy windows and the fluorescent lights flicker overhead, it feels like everything's changed. So yeah, let me back up a bit. I was driving down the interstate, heading home after a week-long work trip. I wasn't in any hurry, just eager to see my dog and crash on my couch. The sky had been looking a little sketchy all day, but nothing too crazy. I stopped at this rest stop. Nothing fancy, just some vending machines and a couple rows of picnic tables. It was the kind of place that smells like old coffee and stale donuts. You know the type. That's when I saw him. This guy sitting alone on one of the benches, kind of hunched over, scrolling on his phone with this half smile like he was trying not to look bored. He had messy dark hair that looked like he'd just run his hands through it a few times, and these glasses that gave off a low-key nerd vibe. I don't know what made me walk over. Maybe just boredom, or that weird need to talk to someone other than myself during a solo trip. "Hey," I said, trying not to sound like a total weirdo. "Crazy weather coming, huh?" He looked up, surprised, then nodded. "Yeah, I was hoping to get a quick break before the storm hit, but looks like it's already here." He introduced himself as Leo, and before I knew it, we were swapping stories about our trips, favorite road snacks, and how much the rain could ruin a perfectly good day. Then, without much warning, the sky opened up like a faucet. Heavy rain, thunder shaking the building, and lightning that made the power flicker. The rest stop started to feel less like a pit stop and more like the last safe place on Earth. Everyone else had scattered, and we realized the storm wasn't letting up anytime soon. That's when Leo and I spotted the maintenance door to the restrooms. Basically a small, cramped space, but way better sheltered than those picnic tables. We ducked inside just as a massive crack of thunder shook the whole place. It was tight, and the fluorescent bulbs buzzed overhead, but it was dry. And honestly, the panic of the storm outside made the cramped space feel kind of intimate. I could hear Leo's breathing get a little heavier, and I'm pretty sure mine did too. As the rain hammered down and the wind howled around the building, I realized I didn't want this moment to end. There was something about being trapped in that tiny bathroom with him, away from everything familiar, that made me feel more awake than I had in weeks. I don't know how long we were stuck like that. Time just blurred. But when the storm finally started to ease up, I knew this was just the beginning of something I wasn't ready to let go of. And honestly, neither was Leo. I guess sometimes it takes a thunderstorm and a crappy rest stop bathroom to make you realize what you've been missing. After what felt like forever, the storm finally started to die down. The rain softened to a steady drizzle, and the booming thunder slowly faded into distant rumbles. We stayed quiet for a moment, just listening to the subtle sounds outside, the occasional drip of water from the roof, a car passing by on the wet highway. It was almost peaceful in this weird, claustrophobic way. I glanced over at Leo, who was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching the door like he was waiting for permission to step out. His glasses were fogged up from the humidity, and his dark hair was kind of plastered to his forehead in a way that made me want to reach out and fix it, like a dad, or maybe a boyfriend. Yeah, that thought caught me off guard. So I said, breaking the silence, "What were you doing out here before the storm hit?" "Just passing through?" He smiled, a little sheepishly. "Sort of. I was on my way back from visiting my sister. She lives a few towns over. I figured I'd stop here to stretch my legs, grab some snacks, and maybe call her. But then the storm rolled in faster than I expected." I nodded. Sounds familiar. I was actually heading home from a work trip. Honestly, I just wanted to get out of the car for a minute before the sky exploded. Leo chuckled, and the sound was warm, like it belonged in this tiny, flickering room. Yeah, road trips are fun until the weather tries to kill you. We talked more as the storm faded, and I started to learn little things about him, like how he's a graphic designer who works remotely, which means he gets to travel a bit, but still has to meet deadlines. He's a bit of a night owl, loves old sci-fi movies, and has a weird obsession with collecting novelty socks. I told him about my own job, software development, and how I've been feeling kind of stuck lately, like I'm moving through the motions without really living. There was this moment where he looked at me and said, "You don't seem stuck right now." I laughed, partly because it was true, and partly because I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a challenge. I don't know how it happened, but we ended up sitting on the bathroom floor, backs against opposite walls, just talking for what must have been an hour. The fluorescent light buzzing overhead wasn't enough to make the space feel sterile. It felt more like a little bubble where nothing else mattered but what we were saying and the way the storm couldn't reach us. At one point, the power blinked out, plunging us into darkness. For a second, I panicked. I hate the dark. But then I heard Leo's voice, calm and steady. "Here," he said, and I felt his hand brush mine as he pulled out his phone. The screen gave off a soft glow, enough to see each other's faces. His eyes caught mine, and there was this flicker of something unspoken. I swallowed hard and looked away, pretending to focus on the cracked tile floor. When I looked back, Leo was watching me like he was trying to figure me out, but also like he was hoping I'd let him in. And honestly, I felt the same. The storm outside was finally a distant memory, but inside that small room, something new was starting, something raw and real and terrifying. We stayed like that for a while, the quiet between us no longer awkward but comfortable. I could feel my heart slowing down from the adrenaline, but the way Leo's presence filled the space made me feel more alive than I had all week. Then, just as the first signs of sunlight started peeking through the grimy window, Leo shifted closer, the space between us shrinking until I could feel the heat of his body. Our hands brushed again, more deliberately this time, and I didn't pull away. "Guess we're both stuck here a little longer," he said with a grin that was half joke, half something else. I smiled back, the kind of smile that's more about hope than humor. Yeah, maybe that's not such a bad thing. And in that moment, with the storm finally past and the day beginning anew, I realized that sometimes the best parts of life come from being stuck. Not alone, but with someone who suddenly makes the whole world feel a little less scary. We finally decided to risk stepping out once the rain slowed to a drizzle. The air outside was thick with that fresh, clean smell that always follows a storm, the kind that makes you want to take a deep breath and just reset. The rest stop was quiet now, almost deserted except for a couple of cars parked haphazardly, like everyone had been caught off guard by the storm and just waited it out. Leo and I walked toward my car together, our footsteps splashing in the puddles. He pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders, and I noticed the way his eyes caught the early morning light. It was kind of ridiculous how nervous I felt, despite having spent the last few hours crammed into a bathroom with him. So I said, trying to keep it casual, "You comfortable driving in this?" He laughed. "After that storm, I think I'm ready for anything. How about you?" "Yeah, me too. Though, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be double-checking the weather app for the next week." Leo grinned. And for a second, the weight of everything, the long drives, work stress, the weirdness of the night, weighed a little less. There was something about the way he looked at me that made me want to know more than just the surface stuff. "Hey," he said, pausing as we reached my car. "Do you want to grab coffee? There's a little diner a few miles down the road. I could use something warm after being stuck in that bathroom." I hesitated for a second, not because I didn't want to, but because this all felt so sudden. Then I caught myself. Screw it. Yeah, I'd like that. We climbed into my car, and the engine roared to life, breaking the silence in a good way. The drive was slow, partly because the roads were still slick, and partly because neither of us seemed to be in a rush. We talked about everything and nothing. How weird it was being stuck in that tiny space, what kind of music we liked, and why Leo hated mornings even though he usually woke up early. At the diner, the place looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. Vinyl booths, neon signs buzzing softly, and a waitress who looked like she'd seen it all before. We grabbed a booth by the window and ordered coffee that was more cream and sugar than anything else. As we waited, I caught Leo watching me, his expression softer now, like he was trying to read between the lines. I felt a little exposed, but in a good way. "You ever do this kind of thing?" he asked quietly. "Randomly end up with someone because of a storm or some crazy twist?" I shook my head. "Honestly, no. I'm usually the guy who avoids talking to strangers, but I guess sometimes it takes something unexpected to make you open up." Leo smiled, and I swear my heart did this weird little flip. Glad you're not boring then. The conversation slowed as we sipped our coffee, the kind that tastes like it's been sitting on the burner too long, but somehow still hits the spot. The diner felt like a bubble, safe, warm, and just a little bit magical. After a while, he reached across the table and gave my hand a light squeeze. I don't want this to be just a one-time thing. You? I looked down at our hands, fingers barely touching but enough to send a jolt through me. I was thinking the same thing. We agreed to exchange numbers before leaving, and for once, I didn't feel the usual apprehension about texting someone new. There was a spark, something easy and real between us, that made me hopeful. The rest of the drive home felt different, like I was carrying this secret energy with me, part excitement, part nervousness, and a whole lot of possibility. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat there for a moment, staring at the empty passenger seat, the night at the rest stop, the storm, Leo. It all felt like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. I texted him as soon as I stepped inside. Coffee was great. Let me know when you want to do it again. His reply came almost immediately. Looking forward to it. And just like that, a night I never expected to remember started to feel like the beginning of something I wasn't ready to let go. The days that followed the storm felt like this strange mix of normal and new. I kept replaying that night in the rest stop bathroom in my head. The way Leo's hand brushed mine, how easy it was to talk to him even though we'd just met. It was the kind of thing that usually makes me cautious, but with him, it felt different. We messaged almost every day. Nothing heavy, mostly jokes about the weather, favorite music, and random thoughts that popped into our heads. Then came the first real conversation, where I could tell he was opening up a bit more, about his family, some struggles with feeling stuck in his career, stuff I recognized because, well, I was in the same boat. It felt like we were pulling back a curtain, and I liked what I saw. One evening, just a few days after the storm, Leo suggested we meet up again. There was this little park in town with a walking path and a pond. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet and kind of perfect for getting to know someone. When I saw him waiting by the entrance, holding 2 takeout cups of coffee, my heart did this ridiculous little jump. He was wearing that slightly rumpled shirt from the first night, the one with tiny geometric patterns, and his hair was still messy, like he'd just rolled out of bed. I'm pretty sure I was smiling like an idiot. We walked the path slowly, the early spring air still a little crisp. We talked about everything: favorite books, childhood memories, the kind of music that makes you feel like you're not alone. Leo told me about his sister again, about how she's always been this anchor for him, and how sometimes he felt like he needed one too. After a while, we found a bench overlooking the pond. Ducks floated lazily on the water, and the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. It was one of those moments where time slows down and you realize you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Leo turned toward me with this look that made my stomach flip. "I'm glad the storm trapped us together," he said quietly. "It's weird, but I feel like I've known you longer than just a few days." I laughed nervously, but honestly, I felt the same way. "Yeah, me too. It's crazy how something as awful as a storm can lead to something really good." He reached out, his fingers brushing against mine before he finally took my hand in his. The contact was electric but gentle, like finding a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. We stayed on that bench until the sky grew dark and the stars blinked awake. The world felt huge and daunting, but sitting there with him, it was like everything else faded into the background. When I dropped him off that night, there was this quiet pause, a moment where neither of us wanted to say goodbye just yet. I leaned in, not really thinking, and kissed him. It was soft and a little hesitant, but it felt like the start of something honest. He smiled, cheeks flushed, and whispered, "This is nice." I nodded, unsure of what else to say, but knowing I wanted more. Over the next few weeks, we saw each other as much as we could. Sometimes it was coffee dates, sometimes long walks, sometimes just texting late into the night until we both fell asleep with our phones in hand. There was no rush, no pressure, just this steady feeling of connection growing between us. Work got busy on both ends, and travel plans crept back into the picture. But every time I thought about those moments with Leo, it reminded me that sometimes the best parts of life come from the unexpected places, like a rainstorm that forces you to stop, pay attention, and maybe, just maybe, open your heart. One night, a few weeks after everything started, we found ourselves back at that same rest stop. The storm had rolled in again, but this time, we weren't trapped strangers. We were two people who had found something real in the middle of chaos. We sat in the passenger seat, windows rolled up against the rain, both of us quiet but comfortable. Leo reached over and took my hand, and I squeezed back. "Remember when we thought this was the worst night ever?" He joked. I smiled. Yeah, guess it turned out to be the best. And sitting there in the quiet hum of the car, watching the rain fall softly, I realized that sometimes life storms aren't just something to survive. They're the moments that bring you exactly what you need. That night in the car, watching the rain blur the world outside, felt like one of those moments you tuck away in your memory because you know it's important, even if you can't say exactly why yet. The storm was nothing like the wild one that trapped us in the bathroom weeks ago. It was calmer, almost soothing, like the sky was just rinsing everything clean. Leo's hand rested on my knee, fingers tracing lazy circles, and I felt this warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the heater blasting on high. We didn't talk much. Sometimes silence is better, especially when it's shared with someone who just gets it. When the rain finally eased, Leo turned to me with that easy smile he always wears, the one that makes me forget how guarded I usually am. "So," he said, "what happens now?" I blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I don't know," I admitted. "I guess we figure it out." He nodded, squeezing my knee once more. "I'm good with that." It was the kind of simple, honest answer that felt rare and refreshing. No grand promises or cliches. Just two people trying to take a chance. Over the next few days, our texting picked up steam. Not the frantic, needy kind, but the kind that made me smile at my phone like a complete goofball. He sent me photos of his ridiculous sock collection. Yes, the novelty kind. And I teased him about how he could never wear them to a client meeting. He sent me playlists of his favorite songs, some of which I'd never heard before, but ended up loving. One evening, I found myself standing outside his apartment building, nerves bubbling up like it was our first date all over again. But it wasn't. We'd spent so much time talking and hanging out, it felt more like arriving at a place I'd been hoping to reach for a while. Leo greeted me with that familiar grin, wearing that same comfort in a crowded room vibe that made me feel like I could breathe easy. His apartment was cozy, bookshelves overflowing with graphic novels, a record player that looked like it hadn't been used in ages, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee and something sweet. We settled onto the couch with 2 mugs of tea, and for the first time, there was no storm outside to distract us. Just the quiet hum of the city and the space between us filling with something new. So, Leo started, "What's something about you I don't know yet?" I laughed. "That's a loaded question." He shrugged, eyes sparkling with mischief. "Come on, you have to have some secrets." I thought for a moment before admitting, "I've always been kind of scared of getting close to people. I guess I never wanted to get hurt." Leo's expression softened, and he reached over to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "Yeah? Well, I'm here now. Maybe it's time to stop running." I swallowed hard, heart-pounding in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. Maybe. That night, we didn't rush anything. There were no fireworks or dramatic declarations. Just two people sitting close, sharing stories, and letting the quiet moments say what words couldn't. Days turned into weeks, and our connection deepened in ways I hadn't expected. There were awkward mornings where I'd catch Leo staring at me like I was some kind of puzzle he wanted to figure out. There were late-night calls where we'd laugh over dumb memes or talk about the future in ways that felt both terrifying and thrilling. One afternoon, we found ourselves back at that little park where we first really talked. The air was warmer now, the trees just starting to green, and the pond sparkled under the sun. We sat on the same bench, legs touching, and I realized how much this felt like home. Leo sighed, resting his head on my shoulder. "I'm glad that storm threw us together." "Me too," I said, feeling a smile spread across my face. He looked up at me, eyes bright. "You know, I was scared to take a chance on this. On us. But now, I can't imagine not having you around." My chest tightened, emotion catching me off guard. "Same here." We stayed there for a while, just being, no need for words. It was in that silence I understood something important. Love isn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes, it's about getting caught in a storm and finding the person who makes you want to face whatever comes next. And with Leo, I was ready for all of it. After that afternoon in the park, things settled into this comforting rhythm I hadn't realized I was craving. Leo and I started carving out more time for each other, even with our busy schedules. Weeknight dinners, lazy Sunday mornings with way too much coffee, and those little texts throughout the day that made me grin like an idiot at my phone. But as much as everything felt easy and right, I couldn't ignore this nagging voice in the back of my head. You know, the one that asks, "Where is this going?" I hadn't been in a relationship like this before. Not really. Sure, I'd had flings and casual stuff, but nothing that felt like building something. One night, we were sprawled on my couch, a half-watched movie playing in the background while rain tapped softly against the window. It was almost poetic how the weather kept working its way into our story. Leo turned to me, his eyes reflecting the muted TV light. "Can I ask you something?" "Shoot," I said, curious. "Are you happy? Like, with us?" It was such a simple question, but it hit me harder than I expected. I hesitated, searching for the right words. "I think I am. I mean, it's scary sometimes. I'm not used to feeling this. Steady, but with you, it feels like maybe I don't have to be on guard all the time." He smiled softly and reached out to brush a stray hair from my forehead. "That's exactly how I feel. It's weird, but good weird." We sat there for a while, the kind of silence that's full but not heavy. It felt like a turning point, like we were both acknowledging that what we had was more than just a coincidence or a temporary thing. A few days later, I found myself at Leo's place again. We cooked dinner together, him with his ridiculous sock collection on full display, me trying not to burn the garlic bread. The kitchen was filled with laughter, spicy smells, and that easy, comfortable energy that made me feel like this was exactly where I was supposed to be. After dinner, we moved to the couch, settling into a tangle of limbs and quiet conversations. Then, out of nowhere, Leo asked, "Do you ever think about the future?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Honestly, I'm not great at thinking past tomorrow most days." He chuckled. "Yeah, me neither, but sometimes I wonder if I should start." I looked at him, really looked at him, the way his eyes searched mine, hopeful and maybe a little scared. "What kind of future?" He shrugged, a bit of a nervous laugh escaping him. "You know, us. Maybe together. Maybe more than just right now." My heart was pounding loud enough. I worried he could hear it. I want that. I just don't know how to say it without messing everything up. Leo leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. "You don't have to say anything right now. We'll figure it out. Together." That night, lying next to him with my hand in his, I realized that the storm that brought us together wasn't just a weird coincidence. It was the start of something real, something worth holding on to, even when it's scary. In the weeks that followed, we started making plans, small ones at first, weekend trips, movie marathons, maybe even a little vacation down the coast. It felt like we were building this little world of our own, one moment at a time. One evening, we were sitting on the balcony of his apartment, wrapped in a shared blanket and watching the city lights flicker below. Leo nudged me gently. "I've been thinking," he said. "What if we made this official? Told people we're us?" I hesitated. It was a big step, and part of me was terrified of what that meant. But looking at him, so full of hope and trust, I knew I wanted to say yes. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Let's do it." He grinned, and I felt this huge weight lift off my chest. Sometimes, love sneaks up on you in the quiet moments, in a cramped bathroom during a storm, on a park bench watching a sunset, or wrapped in a blanket under city lights. With Leo, I wasn't just surviving the storm anymore. I was ready to weather anything with him by my side. A few months later, I found myself sitting across from Leo at our favorite little cafe, the one with the mismatched chairs and the world's best cinnamon rolls. The kind of place that feels like it's been part of the neighborhood forever, quietly witnessing all the comings and goings. We'd come a long way from that night, trapped in a rest stop bathroom during a wild storm. Back then, everything was so uncertain, two strangers thrown together by chance, hiding from thunder and rain. Now, sitting here with his hand wrapped around mine, it felt like we'd built something steady out of that chaos. Leo caught my gaze and gave me that smile I'd come to know so well, the one that says without words, "We're in this together." I squeezed his hand gently, thinking about all the little moments that led us here. Late night talks, awkward first kisses, shared playlists, and quiet mornings where we just existed side by side. I realized how much I'd changed. I wasn't the guy who kept his guard up at all times anymore. I was someone willing to take a chance, to be vulnerable, because being with Leo made me feel safer than I'd ever felt alone. Outside, the sky was clear, and the sun was warm on my skin. It was the kind of ordinary day that somehow felt extraordinary because he was there. "Remember that storm?" I asked, a grin tugging at the corner of my lips. Leo laughed softly. "How could I forget? It feels like a lifetime ago." "Yeah," I said. "I was so scared that night. Not just of the storm, but of what it might mean to really let someone in." He reached across the table and brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. "I'm glad you did." "Me too." There was this quiet contentment between us, a feeling that whatever came next, we'd face it together. No grand declarations or promises, just two people who found something real in the middle of a storm and held on to it. As we stood to leave, Leo slipped his hand into mine, and I felt that same warmth spread through me. It wasn't perfect, and we both had our fears and doubts, but it was ours. Walking out into the sunshine, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected detours lead you exactly where you're meant to be. And for once, I was exactly where I wanted to be.